My name is Christine and welcome to a new video. If it's your first time here and you want to become a CRNA or grow your CRNA career, definitely subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss anything. So comment below if you are currently a registered nurse and you are making a certain amount of money approximately. What are registered nurses making today versus what I'm going to come up with this video? Would love to hear that in the comments below. Now, if you're a CRNA as well, what have you been seeing in the environment? Is it high, is it low compared to this video? So let me get right into it. So you're saying to yourself, you know what? I want to become a CRNA. Oh, you know what? Maybe I want to become a registered nurse, but you're curious about salary. Well, I'm going to talk all about that. So as a registered nurse, there's different types of registered nurses, right? So you could become an associate's prepared registered nurse, which is about 2 years approximately, plus or minus, and a bachelor's prepared registered nurse, which is about a 4-year degree. So even with that, associate's prepared registered nurse versus a bachelor's prepared registered nurse, when looking at salary, a lot of times they are making about the same, even though a 2-year versus a 4-year. But certain institutions, for example, will only accept you if you are a bachelor's prepared nurse. If, for example, if you're going to teach an institution like NYU, for example, they'll want you to become a bachelor's prepared registered nurse. Or if they really want you to work there, if you're an associate's prepared registered nurse, they will actually say, okay, you can work with us, but you're going to have to go to school part-time and get your bachelor's degree. So yes, if you are an associate's prepared registered nurse, don't worry, you can always go back. A lot of institutions will pay for you to go back to school to get your bachelor's prepared, okay? Now, when you're thinking about salary, you're like, how much are registered nurses making on average? Now, it depends on location. Some locations you can be making a lower salary versus a higher salary. What does that mean? Rural versus urban. Different states may be giving you a higher salary versus other states may not be giving you a certain salary. Depends on the institution or what type of working setting you're working as a registered nurse. So let's go into a little bit about registered nursing first, okay? Top 5 states that Alaska, District of Columbia, Oregon, Hawaii, and California. Those are the areas, for example, states that you can make a really nice salary as a registered nurse. Now, the one thing about California, there's a lot of regulations to protect registered nurses. So, and that is the specific area, to live that is the highest paid, for example, registered nurses are making. But remember, that's on average. There are some rural cities or certain states that even though, California is making a certain amount, you can make more than that. That's always a variability. But let's go through the salary a little bit for those high-paying registered nurses. Oregon is $98,000 a year, Hawaii is $106,000, and California is $120,000 a year. But when you think about registered nurses, the average, so those are the top paying states. Well, saying, for example, you're not living in those top states and you're really curious about salary, but looking on average, a registered nurse can be making approximately $73,000 a year on average, which is a great thing to know about. But there are some areas or states or locations or hospital facilities that are paying registered nurses as low as $150,000 a year. So it's always a variety. But on average, it's about $73,000 a year for a registered nurse. Now you say to yourself, great, now I know that. Amazing salary, stable career. You never have to worry about ever finding a job. Literally, nursing is an amazing area to go into. If you don't do anesthesia, if you don't do nurse practitioner, if you don't do midwife, if you just want to be a registered nurse, you are guaranteed to have a really good career. But saying you're kind of like me when I was a registered nurse, I was like, I want to go back to school. I want to become an advanced practice nurse. I want to become a nurse practitioner, or maybe you want to become a nurse anesthetist. Is it worth it? Should I go back to school and become a registered, a CRNA? Will it be worth it? Or should I just stay a registered nurse? Well, I'll say, to me, to be honest with you, looking at the numbers, I would say go back to school. If you really want to have, more autonomy and also a higher salary, there's tons of opportunities to grow. Now, the projection of CRNAs, for example, if you want to become a nurse anesthetist, there's going to be over from 2020 upwards to 2030, just within a 10-year window, salaries will be increased up, like by 45%. You're like, what? Yes, that's a projection. And honestly, since I've been working, the projections have definitely, have pretty much been pretty true. Now, registered nurses on average, on projection for the next 10 years, within the next 10 years, right, is about 12% increase in salary. So you're like, whoa, that's a huge difference. It is a huge difference, but that's just a projection. 12%, an increase over the next 10 years versus 45%. You got to remember too, there's approximately, these are numbers that are out there, approximately 60,000 CRNAs out there in the country, right? So, wow, you're like, that sounds like a high number, but on average, it's not. It's a very low number. So when you think about, okay, so what does that mean? So 60,000 CRNAs, well, what does that mean for registered nurses? Nursing is the nation's largest profession, and career in the country. So when you think about nurses that are out there now, there's approximately 4.2 million registered nurses out there. That includes, of course, associate's prepared registered nurses or bachelor's prepared registered nurse on average. Now, that also probably includes nurse practitioners, midwives, nurse anesthetists, probably in that number, but it doesn't say for sure. But when you think about registered nurses, that is the projection of how many are currently in that career, while CRNAs is 60,000. So it's now you got to think about it too. Anesthesia, it's a great area to go into. There's a shortage in anesthesia providers today. There's not enough, medical doctors in anesthesia. There's not enough, nurse anesthetists. Even there's something called anesthesia assistants. Even with all of those different anesthesia providers, there's still not enough CRNAs out there. Constantly, I get emails, I get phone calls, recruiters, different opportunities to work anywhere in the country, and they'll pay literally anything to get me to move, right? So and even nursing is a whole opportunity to grow. But if you're saying to yourself, should I really do this? Should I really go back to school and become a nurse anesthetist? I'll say yes, go ahead and do it. Now, you're like, well, schooling, is it really worth it? So, well, I know I'm getting a little off on a tangent. I will go into CRNA in just a moment. But I just want to give you a little bit of information to let you think about it a little bit, because I didn't even know this until doing this video. So now think about it too, schooling. So registered nurse, nursing, CRNA. So I'm going to get into that too. Is it worth it to go back to school? But I would say yes. So when you think about becoming a registered nurse, on average, when you go to school to become a registered nurse, it's about $100,000. Of course, some places you may go to school, it could be a state school, you're going to pay a lot less coming to a private school, right? But on average, you say $100,000 to become a registered nurse. While when you compare CRNA school, for example, it's about the same. It's about $100,000. It could be $150,000, but it's about the same amount of becoming a registered nurse. So to look at that on a playing field, just think about it a little bit, meditate that a little bit, because it's about the same amount in schooling. But you're saying, Christine, that's like $200,000 a year. Am I really gonna have that much loans? Maybe not. You can always do military, get scholarships, go to a state school. Significantly less. I went to a state school to become a CRNA. Significantly less loans you're gonna have to take out. So, but I think it's worth it, because listen to this. Let me tell you about CRNA salaries now. So, saying you're a registered nurse and you want to become an advanced practice nurse, let me just get into that first before I get into CRNA salary, because I think you need to know that too, because maybe anesthesia isn't for you and you're thinking it is, but maybe you want to do something different. Midwives are making approximately, on average, looking at 2022, of course it's increasing over time, but on average, the numbers have shown about $112,000 a year. Think about a nurse practitioner. They're making approximately, on average, looking over all the numbers, $120,000 a year. Now, CRNAs, nurse anesthetists, are making approximately $195,000 a year, upwards of $200,000+ a year. So yeah, I think it's worth it. You're doubling your salary. If you're a registered nurse, you're making $73,000 a year approximately. Then you go ahead and become a CRNA, and now you're making upwards of $195,000. That's looking average over the country. It's not saying that if you go to a small town in for example, a small town in Texas, you're making well over $300,000 a year. Because in some places, they utilize CRNAs because there's such a shortage in anesthesia providers that they'll pay CRNAs pretty much what they would pay anesthesiologists, okay? Because of availability and costs. So you maybe get upwards of higher salary because of that. So I would say yes. And yes, you're saying $200,000 of debt, but then you got to think about it too. When you think about registered nurse, you're making double the amount of the salary, projected over 20 years if you were to pay it off. Same example, you have that amount, maybe $150,000. Give you an example, right? Maybe about $1,400 a month you're going to be paying back per month over 20 years. Of course, you can pay more. Maybe you're single, you don't have children, and you are focused on getting rid of your debt, and you can do that. I got rid of all of my debt for my loans for school within 3 to 4 years, debt-free in regards to loans for school. And I should do a video on that because I think that kind of can motivate you. So you can be debt-free. You just got to do it. You got to say to yourself, budget yourself. Don't worry about the money that's going to go into school to become a CRNA. Just focus on learning about it. You're doing the best that you can in school. Get your experience. And if you're passionate enough and you say, you know what, it doesn't matter, Christine, I really want to do this, you do, because you're going to double your salary or even triple it depending on where you work. And so when you look at the numbers, you can pay off, the amount of schooling that it might cost. So I would say do it. I would say registered nurse versus CRNA, you're going to be double or even triple the amount of money you'll be making. $73,000 versus $195,000 plus. So if you want to know, I want to hear you down below. Tell me, you think this makes sense? Going back to becoming a CRNA, do you think that it's worth it? Do you think the schooling is more or less? What was your experience? I would love to hear it in the comments below. So if you want to learn more about CRNAs, how to grow your CRNA, definitely click one of the videos over here, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.